Why do you feel the need to justify your existence to people who've already made up their minds about you? That question should make you uncomfortable because if you're honest, you do it constantly. You explain your decisions to people who weren't consulted. You justify your boundaries to those who violate them. You defend your choices to critics who have no stake in your life. And with each explanation, with each justification, with each defense, you hand over a piece of your authority to someone who never earned the right to judge you in the first place. We are living in the age of over-explanation. Every decision requires a thesis defense. Every boundary needs a justification. Every choice demands a public accounting. Social media has turned us into performers in a trial where everyone is jury, everyone is prosecutor, and no one is ever satisfied with the verdict. You can explain yourself perfectly, lay out your reasoning with crystal clarity, provide evidence and logic and emotional honesty, and still, the court of public opinion will find you wanting. Because here's what we've forgotten. Explanation is not communication. It's subordination. The ancient Stoics understood something about respect that our culture has completely lost. Respect is not earned through explanation. It's commanded through presence. It's not granted by those who understand your reasoning. It's given to those who need no reasoning at all. When you explain yourself constantly, you're not clarifying. You're seeking permission. You're asking the world to validate choices that should require no validation beyond your own conviction. Epictetus never explained himself to his master. He was a slave, his body owned by another, yet he maintained a sovereignty of mind that his master could never touch. How? Because he recognized a truth that free people often miss. Your authority doesn't come from others agreeing with you. It comes from you agreeing with yourself so completely that their disagreement becomes irrelevant. He said, if you wish to be free, desire nothing and no one that is not in your power. That includes their approval. That includes their understanding. That includes their validation of your choices. Think about the last time you made a decision that felt right to you but didn't sit well with others. Maybe you ended a relationship that looked good from the outside. Maybe you left a prestigious job for something more aligned with your values. Maybe you set a boundary that disappointed someone. What happened next? If you're like most people, you explained. You laid out your reasoning. You tried to make them understand. You sought their blessing for a choice you'd already made. And how did that work out? Did they suddenly understand? Did they give you the validation you sought? Or did your explanation just give them more ammunition to question you? Here's the pattern that plays out 1,000 times in your life and you probably don't even see it anymore. You make a choice. Someone questions it. You explain. They push back. You explain more thoroughly. They find holes in your logic. You try to patch those holes with more explanation. They still don't approve. You feel frustrated, drained, less certain of the choice you were initially confident in. And the worst part? You've just trained them that your decisions are up for debate, that your boundaries are negotiable, that your authority over your own life requires their co-signature. The Stoics called this being enslaved by opinion, not just caring what others think. We all care to some degree, and pretending otherwise is usually just another form of seeking approval through performative indifference. But letting those opinions dictate how you justify your existence. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote in his private journals, "I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others." An emperor, the most powerful man in the known world, still fighting the urge to explain himself to his critics. That should tell you something. This isn't a weakness unique to you. This isn't a personal failing. This is a human condition. The urge to explain, to justify, to seek understanding from those who've already decided about you. It's wired into our social nature. We evolved in small tribes where group approval literally meant survival. Being cast out meant death. So we developed sophisticated mechanisms for managing our reputation, for explaining ourselves, for maintaining social standing through constant justification. But we don't live in small tribes anymore. The people you're explaining yourself to aren't your survival network. Most of them are strangers, acquaintances, or people with such limited understanding of your context that their judgment is essentially meaningless. Yet you give them authority. You let their questions make you question yourself. You let their confusion about your choices create confusion in your own mind. And every time you do this, you become a little less sovereign, a little less certain, a little less yourself. Before we go deeper into the Stoic solution, I need you to do something. If this is resonating, if you're recognizing yourself in this pattern, subscribe to this channel. Because what comes next is going to challenge everything you've been taught about communication and relationships. It's going to feel uncomfortable, maybe even wrong at first. But I promise you, on the other side of this discomfort is a level of respect and inner peace you've been searching for your whole life. We're building a community of people who refuse to live on trial. Join us. There's a war happening in your psyche right now. On one side is your authentic self, the part that knows what it wants, what it needs, what it values. On the other side is your social self, the part that needs approval, that fears judgment, that will contort itself into whatever shape seems most acceptable. Every time someone questions your choice and you launch into explanation mode, your social self wins and your authentic self loses ground. Do this enough times and eventually, you lose touch with what you actually want beneath all the layers of what you think others want you to want. Seneca, writing from exile, stripped of his status and separated from everything he'd built in Rome, discovered something profound. He said, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Think about how much you've suffered trying to make people understand you who were never going to understand. How much energy you've burned trying to justify yourself to those who'd already judged you. How much anxiety you've endured anticipating criticism and pre-preparing your defense. That's suffering before it's necessary. That's creating your own prison and then complaining about the bars. The false promise of our age is that if you just explain yourself well enough, clearly enough, vulnerably enough, people will understand. But that's not how understanding works. People understand through their own lens, their own experiences, their own limitations. You could explain yourself perfectly and still be misunderstood because they're hearing your words through their wounds, their biases, their own narrative about who you are. And here's the hard truth. That's not your problem to solve. Let me show you what happens internally when you constantly explain yourself. Your nervous system learns that your choices require external validation to be legitimate. Every time you justify a decision, you're telling your subconscious, "I'm not sure about this. I need someone else to agree before I can be certain." Over time, this erodes your ability to trust yourself. You become dependent on others' approval not just socially, but psychologically. You literally lose access to your own inner compass because you've trained yourself to look outside for direction. This is why people who constantly explain themselves often struggle with decision-making. They've outsourced their authority to the court of public opinion. They can't make a choice without first running it by others, without testing how it will be received, without preparing their defense. And this creates a specific kind of suffering that the Stoics were intimately familiar with. The suffering of living someone else's life while believing it's your own. Marcus Aurelius had advisors, senators, military commanders, family members, all with opinions about how he should rule. If he'd tried to explain every decision to every stakeholder, if he'd sought consensus before acting, the empire would have collapsed. So he developed a different approach. He would consult his reason, align his choice with Stoic principles, and then act with conviction. If people questioned him, he didn't explain. He listened, considered if there was wisdom he'd missed, and either adjusted his course or held firm. But he never justified himself to maintain approval. This is the key distinction most people miss. There's a difference between being open to feedback and explaining yourself for approval. Feedback is information you can use to make better decisions. Explanation for approval is subordination disguised as communication. One makes you stronger, the other makes you smaller. Here's a practical example. You set a boundary with a friend. You tell them you're not available for late-night crisis calls anymore because it's affecting your sleep and mental health. They push back. They say you're being selfish, that real friends are always available, that they've been there for you. Now you have a choice. The explanation route sounds like this. Well, see, I've been really struggling with sleep, and my therapist said boundaries are important, and it's not that I don't care about you. It's just that I need to take care of myself too, and maybe we can schedule times to talk instead. And I hope you understand that this isn't personal. Hear how that sounds. You're defending your boundary. You're bringing in authorities like your therapist to legitimize your need. You're reassuring them it's not personal, as if your boundaries require their emotional comfort to be valid. You've turned a clear statement into a negotiation. And what happens next? They negotiate. They poke holes in your reasoning. They make you feel guilty. Your boundary, which was firm when you started, is now shaky because you've opened it up for debate. The Stoic route sounds different. They push back on your boundary and you say, I understand this is disappointing for you. The boundary stands. That's it. No explanation, no justification, no seeking their approval, just a clear restatement. If they're a real friend, they'll adjust. If they're not, they'll leave. Either way, you've maintained your authority over your own life. Now, you're probably thinking, but that sounds harsh. That sounds cold. Don't I owe people explanation? Doesn't communication require me to help them understand? And this is where we need to go deeper into what the Stoics actually taught about human relationships, because this objection reveals a fundamental misunderstanding. The Stoics weren't advocating for coldness or cruelty. They were advocating for clarity. They were saying that true kindness sometimes means letting people feel their feelings about your choices without trying to manage those feelings through explanation. When you over-explain, you're not actually being considerate. You're being controlling. You're trying to control how they feel about your decision. You're trying to manage their emotions so you don't have to feel the discomfort of their disapproval. Epictetus taught his students to distinguish between what's in their control and what isn't. Your choice? In your control. Your reasoning behind that choice? In your control. Their feelings about your choice? Not in your control. Their understanding of your reasoning? Not in your control. So why do you exhaust yourself trying to control the uncontrollable? Why do you explain and justify and defend, trying to make them feel differently about something you've decided? Here's what the Stoics understood that we've forgotten. When you respect yourself enough not to explain, you're actually respecting the other person's autonomy too. You're saying, I trust you to manage your own feelings about my choice. I'm not going to insult your emotional intelligence by trying to talk you out of your reaction. This is actual respect, not the fake respect that comes from seeking approval, but the real respect that comes from treating adults like adults who can handle their own emotional responses. Think about the people you most respect. Do they explain themselves constantly? Do they justify every decision? Do they seem to need your approval before acting? Probably not. Probably they make decisions, communicate them clearly, and move forward with quiet confidence. And something in you respects that. Something in you recognizes that their lack of need for your approval is actually what makes them respectable. Now here's the uncomfortable part. You can become that person. but it requires you to tolerate something most people will do anything to avoid. You have to tolerate being misunderstood. You have to tolerate people thinking you're wrong, or selfish, or harsh, or whatever story they create about your choices. And you have to let them think that without trying to change their mind through explanation. This is the descent into Stoic practice. This is where it stops being abstract philosophy and becomes lived reality. Because the first few times you don't explain yourself, the first few times you let a boundary stand without justification, the first few times you make a choice and refuse to defend it, you're going to feel anxiety. Your nervous system, trained by years of approval seeking, is going to scream that you're doing something dangerous. That you're going to be rejected, abandoned, cast out. But here's what actually happens. Some people will be uncomfortable. They'll push harder for explanation. They'll get frustrated with your new approach. And a few of them will leave. This is necessary. These are the people who only related to you when you were explaining yourself, when you were seeking their approval, when you were giving them authority over your life they hadn't earned. Their departure isn't a loss. It's a liberation. And then something else happens. Other people, the ones worth keeping, they adjust. They might be surprised at first, maybe even put off. But they respect the boundary. They stop questioning your choices. They start treating you differently because you've trained them through your behavior that your decisions aren't up for debate. And new people start entering your life. People who are attracted to your certainty, your self-possession, your refusal to live on trial. Let me give you the framework the Stoics used to develop this kind of commanding presence. It starts with what they called the dichotomy of control, but applied specifically to communication and respect. There are three categories of things in any interaction where someone questions your choice. First, things entirely in your control, your decision, your values, your inner conviction, your response. Second, things entirely outside your control, their opinion, their feelings, their judgment, their narrative about you. Third, things partially in your control, the clarity of your communication, the tone you use, whether you engage at all. Most people focus all their energy on category 2, trying to control others' opinions through explanation. The Stoics focused entirely on category 1 and selectively on category 3. They would make a decision aligned with their values, communicate it clearly if needed, and then completely detach from managing how it was received. This isn't callousness. This is wisdom, because any energy spent trying to control category 2 is energy wasted. Here's how this works in practice. Someone criticizes your career choice. The old you would explain your reasoning, defend your decision, try to make them see why you're right. The Stoic you recognizes that their criticism lives in category 2, outside your control. So you acknowledge it. I hear that you disagree. Then you return to category 1. I've made the choice that aligns with my values. You don't argue. You don't defend. You don't explain. You simply restate your position with calm conviction. What's happening here psychologically is profound. You're training both your nervous system and theirs. You're teaching yourself that your decisions don't require external validation. And you're teaching them that questioning you won't result in you opening your choice up for debate. Do this consistently and people stop questioning you. Not because you've convinced them you're right, but because they've learned that you're not seeking their approval. Marcus Aurelius faced constant pressure from the Senate, from his military commanders, from his own family, to explain his decisions. He was ruling during plague, famine, and constant war. Every choice he made affected millions. And yet, in his meditations, he kept returning to this principle. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. B1. He knew that explanation and justification were often just procrastination disguised as communication. The virtuous action speaks for itself. The aligned choice needs no defense. But let's address the nuance here, because this isn't about becoming a tyrant who never listens or communicates. The Stoics were actually deeply committed to reason and dialogue. So how do we reconcile refusing to explain ourselves with being open to wisdom and feedback? The answer lies in intention. Are you explaining to genuinely share your reasoning with someone who's approaching in good faith? Or are you explaining to seek approval, to avoid disapproval, to manage someone's feelings about your choice? If someone you trust, someone who's earned the right through their own wisdom and care for you, asks about your decision from genuine curiosity, sharing your reasoning can be valuable. That's dialogue. That's the exchange of ideas between equals. But if someone who has no stake in your life, who hasn't earned your trust, who's coming from judgment rather than curiosity, demands explanation, you owe them nothing. That's interrogation, and you don't have to participate. Seneca distinguished between the wise person's silence and the fool's chatter. He said the sage speaks when speech improves upon silence. Apply this to explanation. Sometimes sharing your reasoning improves the situation, deepens understanding, serves the relationship. Most of the time, especially when you're explaining defensively, it makes things worse. It opens what should be closed. It weakens what should be firm. It subordinates what should be sovereign. Here's a test to help you distinguish. Before you explain yourself, ask, am I about to share my reasoning or defend my choice? Sharing comes from abundance, from certainty, from a desire to connect. Defending comes from scarcity, from doubt, from a need for validation. If you're defending, don't speak. If you're sharing, speak sparingly and without attachment to how it's received. Now we're at the heart of the practice. We've covered the philosophy, the psychology, the distinction between dialogue and defense. Now let's talk about the actual transformation required to stop explaining yourself and start commanding respect. Because this isn't a technique you can apply superficially. This is a fundamental rewiring of how you relate to your own authority. The first shift is internal. You have to genuinely stop believing that you owe everyone an explanation. This is harder than it sounds because we've been conditioned from childhood to justify ourselves. As kids, we had to explain every choice to parents, teachers, authority figures. That was appropriate then. We were developing judgment, but most people never update this programming. They carry that child's belief into adulthood that their choices require an adult's approval. Part of becoming a Stoic, part of developing self-command, is recognizing that you are now the authority. Your reasoned choices, aligned with your values, require no external approval. This doesn't mean you're always right. It means you're willing to be wrong on your own terms rather than right on someone else's. It means you'd rather live your own life imperfectly than someone else's life perfectly. The second shift is behavioral. You have to start practicing restraint. When someone questions you, your habitual response is probably to immediately explain. You have to interrupt that pattern. Pause, breathe, recognize the urge to justify, and then consciously choose a different response. I've made my decision. I'm not going to debate this. I understand you disagree. These simple statements, delivered calmly, do more to establish your authority than any explanation ever could. At the halfway point of this journey together, I want you to consider something. The reason you're still here, still listening, is because part of you knows you've been giving away your power through over-explanation. You've been living on trial, constantly defending your existence to people who have no right to judge it. If you're ready to stop, if you're ready to reclaim your authority, subscribe to this channel. We're creating a space for people who refuse to explain themselves into exhaustion. We're walking the Stoic path together, learning to command respect through presence rather than performance. The third shift is emotional. This is often the hardest because it requires you to sit with discomfort. When you stop explaining and someone is clearly upset about that, you have to tolerate their displeasure without trying to fix it. Your people-pleasing instinct will scream at you to explain, to justify, to smooth things over. You have to recognize that instinct and not obey it. Their discomfort is not your emergency. Their confusion is not your responsibility to resolve. Let me give you 3 specific practices to implement immediately. First, the explanation audit. For the next week, pay attention every time you start to explain yourself. Don't try to stop it yet, just notice. Notice who you explain yourself to. Notice what triggers the explanation. Notice how you feel before, during, and after. This awareness alone will begin to shift the pattern because you'll start to see how automatic and how draining the behavior is. Second, the one-sentence boundary. When someone questions your choice, practice responding with a single sentence and then stopping. I've decided to do this. This boundary is important to me. I'm not available for that. One sentence. Then silence. Let them sit with it. Let them be uncomfortable. Do not fill the silence with explanation. This is excruciating at first because silence feels like pressure and explanation feels like release. But the more you practice this, the more you'll realize that the pressure you feel is just your addiction to approval withdrawing. Sit with it. It passes. Third, the respect inventory. Make a list of the 5 people you most respect. For each one, write down why you respect them. I'm willing to bet that very few of your reasons involve because they explain themselves so thoroughly, or because they seek my approval before acting. You respect them for their conviction, their clarity, their self-possession. This exercise reminds you of what actually commands respect because once you see it clearly in others, you can cultivate it in yourself. Now let's talk about what happens as you practice this consistently. The first thing you'll notice is that your decision-making becomes clearer and faster. When you're not pre-preparing your defense, when you're not anticipating every possible objection, you can actually hear your own wisdom. You can access your intuition, your values, your genuine preferences, without all the noise of imagined judgment drowning them out. The second thing you'll notice is that you have more energy. Constant explanation is exhausting. It drains your mental and emotional resources. When you stop doing it, when you simply make decisions and stand by them without justification, you free up enormous amounts of energy for things that actually matter. For creating, for building, for connecting with people who don't require you to defend your existence. The third thing you'll notice is that the quality of your relationships transforms completely. The people who only engaged with you when you were seeking their approval will drift away. This might hurt initially, but it's necessary. They weren't really connecting with you anyway. They were connecting with your need for them. That's not intimacy. That's codependence. Real relationships, the kind the Stoics valued, are between 2 sovereign people who choose each other without needing each other to be different than they are. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." When you constantly explain yourself, when you seek approval from everyone, you end up in the ranks of the insane, the anxious, the exhausted, the people-pleasers who've lost themselves trying to be acceptable to everyone. When you stop explaining, when you command respect through self-possession rather than seeking it through justification, you escape those ranks. You join a much smaller group, the people who actually live their own lives. But let's be honest about something. This path is lonely sometimes. When you stop explaining yourself, when you refuse to live on trial, some people will call you arrogant. Some will say you're not being communicative enough. Some will project all kinds of narratives onto your silence. And you'll have to let them. You'll have to let people be wrong about you without correcting them. This is the price of sovereignty. Epictetus said, If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. He meant that if you're going to live according to your own reason rather than others' opinions, you have to accept that those operating from opinion will judge you. They'll misunderstand, they'll criticize, and if you try to explain yourself out of their judgment, you've just re-entered the prison you were trying to escape. Here's the deeper truth about respect that our culture has completely inverted. We think respect is something we earn by making ourselves acceptable, by explaining ourselves, by winning approval. But that's not respect. That's tolerance at best, conditional acceptance at worst. Real respect, the kind that's stable and lasting, comes from one source only. Self-respect that's so complete, so unshakable, that it doesn't require external validation. When you respect yourself enough not to explain, when you honor your own judgment enough not to submit it for approval, when you value your own peace enough not to disturb it seeking others' understanding, something shifts in how people perceive you. They might not like you more. They might not agree with you more. But they respect you more. Because respect recognizes respect. Sovereignty recognizes sovereignty. Think about the greatest leaders, artists, thinkers throughout history. How much time did they spend explaining themselves to critics? How much energy did they burn justifying their choices to those who disagreed? Very little. They were too busy living their vision, creating their work, walking their path. And that focus, that refusal to be derailed by others' opinions, that's what made them great. You have that same potential. Not for greatness necessarily, though maybe that too, but for the kind of life that's actually yours. Not a life explained into acceptability, but a life lived with conviction. Not a life defended against criticism, but a life aligned with values. Not a life seeking respect, but a life commanding it through the simple power of self-possession. Let me give you the practical framework for the next 30 days. Every time someone questions your choice, follow this protocol. First, pause. Don't respond immediately. Second, assess. Is this someone who's earned the right to understand my reasoning through their wisdom and care? Or is this someone demanding explanation they haven't earned? Third, respond accordingly. If they've earned it, share briefly without attachment. If they haven't, restate your position once and then disengage. This framework will feel mechanical at first. That's fine. You're rewiring decades of conditioning. Over time, it becomes natural. You develop an intuition for when to speak and when to be silent. When to share and when to simply stand firm. When to engage and when to walk away. This intuition, this wisdom about when explanation serves and when it subordinates, this is what the Stoics called practical wisdom. As we come to the end of this exploration, I want you to understand something crucial. Stopping the constant explanation isn't about becoming closed off or uncommunicative. It's about becoming more discerning with your energy, more protective of your authority, more committed to your own judgment. It's about recognizing that you don't owe everyone access to your reasoning, your process, your inner world. The Stoics believed that the free person is the one who lives according to reason rather than opinion. Every time you explain yourself seeking approval, you're living according to opinion. You're letting others' judgment determine whether your choice is valid. Every time you refuse to explain, every time you simply state your decision and stand by it, you're living according to reason. You're declaring that your reasoned choice is valid simply because it's yours. This is the Stoic art of commanding respect. Not through force, not through manipulation, not through performance, but through the quiet power of someone who knows their own mind and doesn't need anyone else to validate it. Through the unshakable presence of someone who's willing to be misunderstood rather than explain themselves into exhaustion. Through the sovereign stance of someone who answers to their own conscience, not the court of public opinion. If you've made it this far, you're ready for this transformation. You're ready to stop living on trial. You're ready to reclaim the authority you've been giving away explanation by explanation, justification by justification, defense by defense. Subscribe to this channel and commit to this path. We're building a community of people who refuse to explain their way into respect and instead command it through self-possession. Join us. The world will continue to demand explanations. People will continue to question your choices. Critics will continue to judge you. This is guaranteed. But here's what changes. You stop participating. You stop defending. You stop justifying. You make your choice, you communicate it clearly, and then you move forward with conviction. And in that refusal to explain, in that commitment to your own authority, you discover something most people never find: the unshakable respect that comes from respecting yourself completely. Stand firm, speak sparingly, explain never. Command respect not by seeking it, but by embodying the self-possession that makes seeking unnecessary. This is the Stoic way. This is your path to freedom.